Hello, I'm Paddy Delaney, and welcome to Integrated Infrastructure, a podcast dedicated to bringing you news and views from industry leaders involved in the development, design, construction and management of the many built forms that make up Australia's integrated infrastructure. This is episode 6 of Integrated Infrastructure. This week I had the opportunity to catch up with Paul Ferris. Paul is the General Manager of M&E and Rail at Lendlease Engineering. Paul tells us how his career pivoted from the dying UK coal mining industry and into rail before he eventually came out to Australia. Amongst other things, we talk about the tidal wave of infrastructure projects on the way, why people are the biggest challenge in delivering that tidal wave. We talk about the need to attract, retain and train people in the industry, and why there needs to be a major mindset change when it comes to viewing transferable skills. Finally, Paul gives us some insight into the exciting times ahead for Lendlease Engineering, Acciona, Coleman Rail and John Beaver M&E. I hope you enjoy the podcast. Remember to subscribe, like and share if you do. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with Paul. But Paul, welcome to Integrated Infrastructure. Thanks ever so much for coming on and having a chat to us today. Let's get straight into it, and maybe you could introduce yourself, tell people who you are and what you do.
Thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be talking to you this morning. My name is Paul Ferris. I'm the General Manager for Rail and M&E with Lendlease. A bit about myself. I've been in Australia almost 14 years now. Proud to say I spent the first year or so up in Mackay doing an electrification scheme into the port of Dalrymple Bay. So that was very interesting and a great insight into Australia, having landed in a regional area first rather than one of the major cities. And then some time in Brisbane and the rest of my time in Sydney, albeit in a national role. So I've had some fantastic opportunities all around Australia, like I say, for the past 14 years. Prior to that, I worked on a number of large alliances and contracts in the UK, in London and in Manchester. And prior to that, I was in the mining industry, looking at heavy belt and scraper conveyors for the coal and quarrying industries. So very short snapshot about myself there.
That's great. I actually, I didn't realise that. I just obviously did a bit of research for our conversation today, but I didn't realise that you had a mechanical background rather than a rail background,
yes.
And B, that you'd been in mining before anything else. So,
yeah, I think you talk about backgrounds, and even now with in your subject area with recruitment, you can look at people's qualifications and what they've done, and there still really isn't any true rail qualifications to be gained, and people move into it after either an electrical, civil or mechanical background. So it is quite interesting where people in the rail industry come from, and they all come together.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Look, I think I've explained the premise of the podcast is really to try and give something back to people that we work with and the candidates and the clients that we work with. And we were literally just talking about COVID and about the current situation. And one of the things that we try and do on the podcast is to give people some relatable stories about when we have been in a similar situation, maybe where the economy has been tough or there's been some difficult times, and being able to see a route out of that. I'm sure you've seen a couple of recessions like I have in the UK, and you've probably seen the GFC over here as well. Are there any times that you sort of can reference back to where it's been similar to what it is now?
I think there's one. I touched briefly there on my first career, if you like, in the mining industry and the quarrying after the miners' strike and everything that happened.
Of course.
And coal having a downturn in the UK. I told a story at a few conferences and the like that my first job out on site was to install a conveyor belt that took coal off ships from Australia at Port Talbot in Wales. And my first job in Australia was to build a railway to put coal onto ships.
To send it back the other way.
So a bit of a full circle. But yeah, definitely. So like I say, I was in the mining industry. That took a downturn. And at the same time, that must have been around the late 90s. So all the support services, of which we were one, were all in downturn, lots of redundancies. Industry is really disappearing, to be honest. And at the very same time, the rail industry Network Rail had just come into fruition. And so the number of alliances were just starting up. And so a lot of people transitioned from that mining sector into the rail industry. So that's a good example.
Yeah, and that was a crazy time, wasn't it? End of the 90s when we had that big recession. I started working in 99, came out of university then, and there were very little options, which is why I ended up in recruitment, funnily enough, having done politics and economics. But that was a stressful time. And how did you find those opportunities to be able to transition? Was that the sort of natural course of the industry, or were the people that supported you to be able to go and do that?
I had a mentor at the time that was in the rail industry. He pointed me in the right directions when it came to how to position yourselves, even things like writing your CV, making sure that you understood what experience you had yourself. So I think sometimes everything has to come together. That involves a positive mindset, understanding what skills you've got and understanding how transferable they are.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes you can be your own worst enemy and believe that you haven't got a skill set that will suit an industry when in fact you have, and the people that are looking for talent might be looking for something that you don't know you actually possess yourself. So it's that self-awareness and that positive mindset to put yourself forward and put yourself forward for those positions. So I think at that time I was fortunate enough to have somebody who guided me in the right direction. At the same time, like I say, the rail industry was growing, and so there were a number of opportunities for skills to be transferred, and that's what happened.
And were you? Did you ever sort of think you'd end up in rail, or did you have an interest in rail, or was it more the mechanical side of things that you're interested in?
I think I always had an interest in construction, particularly site works, the logistics and the people management side of construction. So that was always an interest, and always something that I was able to do. And you don't like talking about yourself, but a bit of a talent for. So I always enjoyed it. I think enjoying your work, it makes you better at your own particular tasks as well.
Yeah.
You can enjoy work, that's an absolute bonus. So when I did transfer in, I was able to find a position where I could put those skills to the task.
Yeah, that's great. I was talking to the podcast that we released this week was with a good friend of mine called Ken Hawkins, who went from left school at year 10 and then went to sort of do labouring on a Mirvac site and ended up sort of through his hard work sort of coming up through the HSE route in construction. And then took a massive career pivot and went down the asset management side of things, and now he works in the property world. You had a career pivot as well. In this current market, there's got to be a lot of career pivots going on. The number of people from Qantas or Virgin or other industries that the travel dependent. What advice would you give to people who are looking for a career pivot at the moment, maybe looking to get into engineering or into rail specifically?
In terms of advice, I think I've touched on it already in terms of that self-awareness, knowing what skills you've got and understanding that they are transferable. You look at some of the people like you've already mentioned who work for Qantas in that airline industry, lots of great talent in there. And I do remember with the mining sector, British Rail actively, went to, I know the management unions and other bodies that knew where the talent was and what they were doing, to introduce what kind of a role was there for people. So in terms of advice for moving into transferable sectors or career pivots, it is that self-awareness, knowing what skills you've got, understanding that you are valuable to the industry. And infrastructure isn't just about engineering. There's so many tasks that have to be undertaken. There's logistics, there's planning, finance, commercial. It's not just the people who can actually do the calculations on the structure, for example. There's a whole support network required. So there's many skills and opportunities in the industry as a whole.
Yeah, it's interesting with all of this. Everybody's talking about needing to repurpose people, retrain them, get them into jobs. From a recruiter's point of view, clients never want somebody who hasn't done exactly what their job is. They sort of say, well, no, they haven't done this, they haven't done that, they haven't done the other.
Yeah,
it's gonna take a mindset shift, isn't it, and a culture shift from people, especially with this infrastructure pipeline that we've got coming. And the inability to bring people in from overseas. how's that mindset going to happen? Because I think that some people will make it easily, or certainly be active in doing that, and it'll be hard work to do it, because you're going to have to dig down into people's skills more and understand what they can do, exactly as you said. But I wonder if industry might struggle with that a little bit. It's easy to say, but much harder to do.
Definitely. And that's really interesting. It's a good question, because not only can we not bring people in from overseas, short term, we might not be able to bring people in from interstate.
Yeah.
We've already seen issues with COVID, people flying in, New South Wales, Queensland, and especially Victoria at the moment.
Yeah.
So we start seeing these waves start to flatten out, to use an expression that's used quite a lot in recent times. We are going to have an issue. And I think there is an onus on hiring managers to understand that they can't always have exactly what they want, because the people aren't there in the industry. The level of experience isn't there. And we shouldn't forget the backdrop of all this is we've got more infrastructure work in Australia than Australia's ever seen. We all talk about this tidal wave of projects that is now here. It's not just on the horizon. Look at New South Wales, Victoria, Perth, Queensland, all have got major projects actually happening on the ground and more in the pipeline. So we've almost got a perfect storm when it comes to recruitment and identifying talent. So I think there has to be an open mind on recruitment when people are looking at CVs. If they don't see what they want in the first page and a half, not to discard and really ask the proper questions in an interview as to where people can be purposed.
Yeah, that segues quite nicely to another thing that we've talked about recently in terms of let's say we get to the point where we're going to repurpose these people, we're going to bring them in and invest in them so that they can be part of this infrastructure boom. And the operative word in what I just said is the invest bit. And to invest in people, you need money. And to have money, you need to be making money. And the industry's got a problem with that at the moment, haven't they? Yeah. So what are you seeing right now to that's going to improve the situation in terms of this profitless boom in the work coming through the pipeline? Are you seeing stuff that you're sort of feeling positive about?
I think there is positivity out there. We always talk about equitable risk sharing. I think we've still got some way to go to understand what that actually means. If you've got a special purpose vehicle, such as an alliance or a PPP, they have to be able to manage those risks and at the start of the process in procurement actually understand them as well. So I think from the client side, again, as I said, we've got some huge projects going out to the market in all states. I do believe we are still getting there when it comes to understanding who is best placed to manage that risk. And I think we will get there. It has been a long process. And we've talked about, the people in the industry who are available. We've got huge client organizations now where people have joined. Sometimes there's a mix of contractors and salaried staff. So again, that adds some complexity into the mix. But I do believe as an industry, we are getting there, and we will finally get to a point where we do have equitable risk shared. And therefore it should lead to, good project delivery, and then hopefully margins at the end of the project completion.
Yeah, Victoria's done quite well on the alliancing sort of model in the recent years with the
level crossing removals.
Level crossing removals, yes. Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. New South Wales, we're seeing a form of contract coming along, sort of similar to Central Station, where there's a more collaborative risk sharing, not necessarily equitable, but collaborative risk sharing. Is it time we saw some more alliancing come out of New South Wales, do you think, especially for those sort of up to $1 billion sort of type projects?
Mm-hmm. There has been a couple of alliances quite recently with More Trains, More Services. Rail Alliance, that's been going for a long time now, albeit I think New South Wales turned to competitive alliances for a while. So I do believe alliances are still used, albeit in the form of a collaborative contract without using the alliance word. So it's that kind of model, that collaborative model, where you can share that risk and understand it together. That is best to move forward with.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, no, great stuff. Besides what we've sort of touched on already, what do you think the biggest challenges are for the industry right now, for infrastructure as a whole?
I think it's something that's often said too much. That people are the most important asset. I know we've already touched on it. However, that is the biggest risk that we're facing going forward. The amount of work in the market, the amount of complex work in the market, the lack of mobility in Australia, the lack of the ability to bring people in from overseas, and having to really make sure we get the best out of who we have in the industry at the moment. I've already said client side now have large teams of very, very competent people, very experienced people. That has somewhat diminished the contractor pool from which you can hire from and which people move around in. So are people best placed in the industry as a whole to deliver the work that's in the pipeline? That's a question that I think we all have to have a look at.
Yeah, definitely. People and capability is definitely the biggest, one of the biggest issues for sure. What can you tell us about the Lendlease, Coleman, Acciona situation?
Still going through a change of control. There's been a number of announcements made to the market that we're still going through that process. I think from a personal note, all I can say is a very exciting opportunity. It's not just the Acciona and Lendlease Engineering coming together, but we've got Coleman Rail and John Beaver M&E capability as well. So I think we get the structure right, the people coming together. So some great teams in terms of rail for the people that are in Lendlease Engineering and also in Coleman Rail. So when the two come together, and like I say, we do get that mix correct of Coleman Rail and Acciona, I think it's a very exciting time. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, brilliant. And any idea what the timeline is for sort of understanding a bit more about what that's going to look like? Or is that a few weeks off, a few months off?
I can't say. We're going through the change of control. As you can appreciate, it's a very complex process. I said there's been some communication out to the market. So hopefully we can get that all completed.
Yeah, very good. And you've been at home for months now, haven't you? You've been you haven't been in the office for quite a while.
Fair while, yes. Working from home, I think from the end of March. Was the start of it. So that brings its own challenges. I think things such as Zoom, which we're on now, and Teams has worked very, very well. It has needed a change of focus as to how we all work.
Yeah.
Now out on projects, people are still out in the field delivering. So it's been different for a lot of people in the industry, but it's been at home for a while now.
Yeah, fantastic. Look, we are a short form podcast and very much appreciate your time. And I know you're a very busy man. So to finish off, tell us what you're excited about right now.
We'll just touch on it. Very excited about the Acciona, Lendlease, Coleman Rail deal being completed. I think it's an exciting future, lots of work in the market. We talked about people. I think making sure we've got the people in the right positions, making sure we've got that set up correct, and looking at the pipeline ahead. So it is a very exciting time.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I've been on a few calls recently and listening to the one in particular this week, a New South Wales infrastructure update, and the amount of work that's coming is just bonkers. It's absolutely crazy. Yeah. And their biggest concern is the flow of work and giving that flow of work to the market. So I think it's going to be great once your company sort of is fully formed and ready to go, because having another really sort of big, formidable top tier contractor is really important for the market to be able to actually deliver all of that work as well. So fantastic. Look, Paul, thanks ever so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And again, I'll compliment you on your bookcase behind you. It's very Zoom friendly. And have a fantastic weekend.
You too. Thanks very much.
Cheers, Paul. Thanks. Bye. Integrated Infrastructure is powered by North Search, specialists in executive and technical search across engineering, design, construction, property and energy markets in Australia. If you'd like to find out more about North Search or get involved with this podcast, you can click on the links in the show notes or email me directly at the address on the screen. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Integrated Infrastructure. Please tell your friends and colleagues if you did, and we hope to see you again soon.